Good morning, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of Redefining Reality. Today, I'm joined by a very inspiring individual, someone who I'm excited to chat with and share with y'all, and that is the woman who goes by the name The Real Sun. So, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be speaking with you.
Likewise, always a pleasure. And The Real Sun, a little bit about her. She is an educator, an artist, a proud resident of Jane and Finch in Toronto, hails from Korea originally, and is all about purpose and social justice and education in the work that she does. And so, if you know me, you know that those are all things that I'm into and things that I love to talk about and share about. And so, we're going to dive into a bunch of that today, share her story, share what she's up to, what she's got going on in Toronto, and just share the love. So,
Absolutely.
mhm.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to be speaking with you today, and kind of sharing with you some of the journeys that I've been on, around coming to my path of purpose. And ultimately, I think that's my primary focus in terms of really at the center of all I do, being an artist. I'm a singer, I'm a songwriter, I'm a poet. I'm also an educator. I work within the school system. I work within community settings, and also working with various different institutions as well, and have been doing all of this work for since I think 2005 really is when I started really diving into this work, and then being able to bring in components of healing, because social justice is really at the core of the work that I do. My soul calls me to be a change maker. My soul calls me to create an impact on the world that is going to help us become a more evolved version of who we are. And my initial route to it was a very political kind of entry point of looking at, inequities and looking at the history of colonization and looking at various different systemic oppressions that created the foundations of the world that we live in, especially here in North America and in Canada and in Toronto, right? And
Mhm.
so the core of my work really started from a place of having processed my own oppression that I went through as a young girl, being from a home where there was a lot of violence, right? My father was very abusive, and so my mom and I actually came to Canada uh, in an effort to, yeah, kind of escape that situation. And so, and then having moved into a community where I was the only one that looked like me other than my mom, good old rural Ontario.
Mm.
And so feeling a lot of shame around my cultural identity, feeling a lot of the internalized racism and violence that was happening towards me was something that I was trying to heal from. And still a continuous journey, because when you have deep wounds and traumas from when you're a young child, it takes, being on a holistic path and being on the path of healing is a lifelong journey. And so my entry point was very personal in a sense of dealing with these larger systemic issues of gender-based violence, of racism, of inequality and inequities, and feeling them on a visceral level, feeling them really shaping the container for my life, and realizing that I didn't need, well, that it was important that I didn't formulate my entire identity around my wounds. And I think that's what a lot of us do, is that we cling to the stories of our pains, of our sufferings. And they are very deep and important in terms of how we come to understand the world. But I think sometimes when we do not do the proper healing work, then we get stuck in that energy, and then we end up perpetuating a lot of negative cycles into our lives, and then we don't ever really reach our full potential. And So I was doing a lot of work with youth. I actually a youth myself when I started teaching, and I started with working with a lot of young people in specifically speaking around issues of race and speaking around issues of systemic oppression and trying to understand our identities within the context of the world so that we could have a better footing in reclaiming our own identities, which is a process that I also had to go through as well. Um, and then that path, yeah, really led me to understand that, the work that is really important to happen on the ground in terms of the social justice work, in terms of, because a lot of the work that I was doing in my early years was very political, radical, grassroots, organizing. And then I started looking around at the community and realizing that we're not well. Those of us who are trying to help heal others, or those of us who are trying to make the world a better place, we're still dealing with the toxins and the poisons and the trauma that surrounds us that we're trying to fight against. So it became a personal journey of needing to heal so that I could be more stronger in the work that I was doing to make an impact in the community. And so then I went into the study of psychotherapy and bioenergetic therapy and energy healing, and studied for 4 years at the Integral Healing Center of Toronto. And then now what's happened is a culmination of all of that work under a company called Voice of Purpose that I founded as the creator of, and it's Voice of Purpose, we deliver purpose-driven education through the arts, and we stand for innovating education for the evolving generation, knowing that our systems of education currently are built on a very archaic model that doesn't serve the modern day interests and needs of our students and young people. So when I came to that journey of healing within myself to give my work more integrity, I realized, what is the purpose? What's the point of kind of going through that journey of healing? Because for me, it was motivated behind, well, I want to be able to heal the systemic oppressions within myself, because I need to also be a living embodiment of the change that I want to see out in the world. And through that process, I realized the real work and the real reward of doing the healing work is that you come to understand who you are on a true level, beyond, the labels that society puts on us, beyond the harmful ideas that have been implanted in our heads through the traumas that we've been through. You come to an understanding of your true inner light, your true inner purpose. And that is the thing I think that we're all looking for, is to be in that place of peace within yourself, to not be in agony around the struggles that you've been through, but being fully fulfilled in who you are. And that transcends race, gender, all of the different identities, even though those identities are really important to helping us to contextualize our own personal path of purpose and what that is. I understood that at the core of my social justice organizing is an idea that what is the point of social justice is to make the world a better place, right? And in making the world a better place, you think of people that are fulfilled in who they are, that are happy, that are living in alignment with their purpose. And so it kind of has come full circle for me, and I realize now my purpose is to help other people come to their purpose. And so the work that I do now is centralized around Voice of Purpose, through which I teach at various different levels, right? So my main thing that I've done, that I have a real deep passion for, is working with young people, especially teens. I love the high school age. So I have work that I've done primarily in like high schools and middle schools, where I go into the classroom and I work with the curriculum, introducing arts-based ways of learning as well. So yeah, and I could go on, but I feel like
Yeah. No, there's a lot there.
there's
There's a
a
lot
lot
there.
there. Yeah, for sure.
And
Yeah.
I want to um, just reflect also that with the somewhat limited experience I've had working with youth, it has definitely been like the high school age where it's like they're open enough and they're curious enough and they can relate to you enough to really just like be themselves or have the space.
Mm,
We help to create the space for them to be themselves and for them to explore things that they might not feel comfortable exploring with their teachers or with their parents, or with some other adult figure who's too far removed from where they're at. And I mean, education and education reform and evolution and all those things are very exciting for me, and so I'm sure we'll dive more into that. But I want to bring it back to that piece you dropped about the healing journey and
yes.
how it's all about knowing yourself, right?
Yes.
It always reminds me of the quote, sort of, it's like the whole know thyself, heal thyself, love thyself. As just like foundational pieces
Yeah.
of what we have to have in place if we're going to be, like you said, healthy, happy human beings,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because I came to a similar realization, also triggered due to my own sort of suffering and my own need for healing. Right? You come to this awareness where um, you look around and you're just like people are not doing good. On the whole, we're not eating the right things. We're not sleeping. We're not dealing with emotions. We're not connecting to nature. Um, and so it's no wonder we're in the situation that we're in,
Mm,
right? It kind of makes
mm.
me laugh. It's a sort of a sad, funny truth that um, we are or we have taken part in creating the problems that we're now having to solve.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that internal journey is so, so important at every stage of development, you know? So as adults, I think we have a lot of pressures on us still to perform in a certain type of way. The way that I kind of see it is like this, is that, when you're in your high school years, there is kind of this pressure to figure out what it is that you're doing. What are you going to do for the rest of your life? What is it that you want to study in school? What is it if you continue on to post-secondary studies? What is the thing that's going to give you the most amount of return on your investment in terms of looking into your education? And a lot of people don't have that pathway or a deep understanding of who they are. So it's like that internal work to understand who you are is first and foremost step number one. I think step number two is then to invest energy in developing the skills to manifest what it is that you're being called to do, right? And then once you're on that path, to be nurturing yourself and taking care of yourself and making sure that you're grounding and making sure that you are taking care of your needs so that you can be strong for the goals that you've set and also strong for the people that are around you. And I have a workshop that's coming up called Grounding Space, which is geared towards adults. So I serve primarily kind of like three different groups currently. One is kind of teens and high school. Another is artist entrepreneurs. Once you kind of step into your purpose and developing kind of those skills around how do I create my own path forward that is alignment with my purpose. And then the other piece is when you're in the work, sometimes it's hard to maintain that space of self-care and self-love. And so we kind of end up losing that grounding. So Yeah, grounding space is a space that I've created once a month for adults who are on their path of purpose or who are kind of striving to be on that path of purpose, who are also in the service of others, who are constantly in the service of others, whether you're an educator or an artist or a healer or a seeker. A lot of us that are on this path, that are answering the calling within us, sometimes struggle with being there for ourselves because we're constantly in the service of others. And so, in that space, I think it's really important for us to find time to heal. And so, the first workshop that I'm holding in the series of 3 that I'm doing is January 21st. And I'm also doing one on February 18th and March 18th as well. So it's the third Saturday of every month for the first quarter of the year. I'm offering this space for, specifically educators, artists, teachers, community workers, frontline workers, and people who feel themselves to be on the path of purpose, whether you're in the path of purpose of serving others in your professional life, or you find yourself serving others a lot in your personal life, and you find yourself being taxed in your energy and not able to fully show up because you're exhausted, right? And we've all faced that burnout. We've all kind of been there. And so it's almost kind of an experiment as well, because, I'm responding to a need that I see out in the community. And so I'm inviting people to join me on this journey. If folks want to find out more about it, you can find it at voiceofpurpose.org. You'll find a link for grounding space. And then I think you also do a little notes at the bottom of your show there, so I can definitely send the direct event link as well to you too.
Yeah, we'll link everything up in the show notes. So if you're in the area or going to be in the area and want to come by and meet up in the flesh and share some time and space, then that all information will all be there. Sounds like a phenomenal concept, and very much it reminds me of what someone else whom I follow who also has a background in bioenergetics.
Yeah.
Right? A guy named Elliot Hulse. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Mm-mm.
But so he's been doing these things. He's a strength coach, and used a lot of bioenergetics for his own process, and now holds these things called grounding camp. That is, I think it's a weekend, like a 2 or 3 day event, and from what I've seen in their promo, it looks intense. And you got people, doing all sorts of chanting and dancing and moving and shaking and really, getting into the body, right? Which, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I imagine would be involved in what you're putting together.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just have you share a bit on bioenergetics and like what that means to you, and how that tool, how that understanding, how those experiences can help one. Because a lot of people aren't familiar with it. It's still kind of flying under the radar sort of modality.
Yeah, so bioenergetics is grounded in psychotherapy as a starting point, right? Western psychotherapy, very Jungian way of looking at the inner workings of the mind and looking at the different developmental stages of a human being, and in combination with Eastern traditions of energy. So within bioenergetics, there's an understanding that we operate within character structures, and that we have different character structures that speak to the ways that we have internalized our traumas, and also the ways that we have different ways of holding energy in our bodies, and the different ways that we emotionally deal with the struggles that we face. So at the core basis of understanding of energetics or bioenergetics is an understanding that your your mental and psychological space interacts with your energetic body and takes up space in your physical body. And so we understand trauma as being energy that's trapped in the body. The best way, there's a really great book by Peter Levine called Healing Trauma. And it is basically one of the stories that he tells in the book, which I think illustrates this kind of whole thing really, really well, is that what happens when you go through a life-threatening situation, right? Say, like physically, you feel like your life is going to be threatened. What happens to your body? It goes into a state of hypervigilance. All of this energy comes up. You're all of a sudden, way more kind of intensely. Your adrenaline is going. Your heart's beating faster on a physiological level, right? And all of these chemicals are being produced in the brain to take you into the fight or flight response. Because our bodies as human beings, we're very mammalian in a sense. Well, not in a sense. We are mammals, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a certain level of biology to our physical existence where we have our minds have evolved to a certain level, but our bodies have remains in the animal kingdom. And so what happens in the wild when an animal goes through a triggered fight or flight response with that extra energy that comes up, what they do is say they survive a life-threatening situation. Say a rabbit is out in the wild and it's eating, and an eagle swoops down to try and kill it for its food that lunch, and he somehow survives, right? You very rarely see traumatized animals out in the wild. Now, what happens with that rabbit is that if he survives that situation, he will shake to release of that extra energy. Some animals will jump, run, replay certain scenarios so that they can expend of that energy somehow. What humans do is not what's physiologically best for us, is we do what's socially acceptable, and we hold it in, and we store it in different areas of the body. And sometimes, and the thing about energy is that it has to come out some way, somehow. So sometimes if we don't release of that energy in a healthy way, it gets stored and then released in ways that can be destructive or violent, unconscious. And so the understanding of bioenergetics is in therapy, when you're working with your therapist, you're targeting different emotional traumas and releasing them by feeling them where they are within the bodies. And then through the understanding of the character structures, understanding how the different chakra systems and the emotional body is working in concert to understand what sorts of release a person may need based on their character structure. Yeah, so the oral character, there's the schizoid character, like different ways that we internalize energy, depending on that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's incredible how wise the body is, right? And how brilliant nature is to that. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's built in, and if we are allowed to follow our instincts, we will, look for ways to get that out, to shake that out and work it off. Or, I know in a lot of traditional societies, that's why they would have ritual and dance and ceremony and drum circles and all those different things, right? They knew that we had to create the space to deal with this stuff. Otherwise, it would lead to, sickness in the tribe or being unwell and ultimately death, right? The end of survival of their people. Mm-hmm. That's why, personally, I love to look back at those traditional cultures or our sort of hunter-gatherer ancestors and see what it is that they were doing. How were they living? How were they interpreting the world? How were they interacting with the world? How were they dealing with challenging experiences in order to figure out tools that we can use as modern day humans, modern day domesticated humans, right? Because we're not wild animals anymore. Our wildness has been sort of socialized out of us. And so I love how you bring it back to the reality that we are these, biologically bound beings, at least for
Yes.
this experience. I find many times um, in certain worlds or certain aspects of healing or the New Age community, there's a denial of our animal nature, right?
Mm.
I know a lot of religions have done that. Like I was raised in the church, so I was raised in a Protestant Baptist sort of upbringing, and the whole Christian myth and all the guilt and shame that they associate to our animal nature, right? It goes very, very deep, and that's sort of the core of, the Western world. And so,
Right.
hmm
Well, I think the idea of shaming is something that is very, yeah, prominent in our culture, in the Western worlds. There definitely has been a lot of damage that's been done by various different religious institutions, including Christian religions, that connect, yeah, kind of has a fear based, and I'm not talking about the teachings of Christ. I think the
mm,
teachings of Christ and the actions of the religious institutions of churches can be two very different things. So
yes,
what I'm
very
talking
different.
about is the the cultural, I guess, the control aspect of needing to control populations uh, for interest of dominance of power of elite groups within our societies have created a sense of shame that kind of has been funneled through the church. But I think this idea of shame is one that's also archetypal and kind of very much embedded in an understanding of or the story that we've been told that we're not worthy,
Mm,
right? This feeling that we walk around with not feeling comfortable with who we are because there are these messages about who we should be as opposed to embracing the truth that we are. And I think that is truly the challenge of our modern day generation is to get to that place where we can shed all of the disillusions and the lies that we've been told about who we are and start stepping into the truth of who we are, which is the power that flows through each one of us. And the reality is that we are part of the same thing. We are one with all, and in the sense that I am part and part, I'm made of the same stuff as the stars. You are. This wall is. We are created of the same basic components of life. And so there is something on a fundamental level that connects all of us. And I think that is an within the understanding of that is an understanding that we are sacred, right? Because we are, for me, I believe in God, but I also believe in the universe that, depending on what language is accessible for people. And it's coming back to the sacredness in each one of us, I think, really is the key to shedding that shame that we've internalized and that we've been force fed down our throats to tell us that we are not worthy, and that we are somehow incomplete, that we are somehow, less than this projected ideal that's been put out there. And I think the process of healing is ultimately coming into that space of resilience, because, and also ultimately coming into your true purpose. Because when you are aligned with your true purpose, you are accepting now the fact that you have something to offer to this world, that there is a special light that glows within you, that, that light is not something to be ashamed of. And for a long time, that was the process that I went through, is realizing, feeling like I wasn't being seen, feeling like my light wasn't being honored, feeling ashamed of who I was because of the racism that I had gone through, because of the abuse that I had gone through, feeling a lot of shame around who I was naturally, and then realizing that shedding that shame was really important for me to embrace my true purpose. It was really important for me to step into the true light that I am, and to be able to show up for people, to be able to manifest beautiful things out into the world. And I think grounding back into the very basics is super important. So throughout grounding spaces is also something that we're going to be doing, is grounding back into very basic things around breath, grounding into basic things around celebrating the small wins, celebrating our ability to grow. I've been recently really inspired by the work of Carol Dweck, who's an educator that talks about the growth mindset and talks about the importance of prioritizing, and also thinking about the fact that on a very scientific level, we grow all the time. And sometimes people think that you are born with a certain level of intelligence and you're stuck with it. You're born with a certain set of aptitudes and you're stuck with that. And that, what she calls, is the fixed mindset. And within the growth mindset comes with an understanding that we develop new neural pathways when we engage in practice of something, that we have the ability to grow in our different levels of intelligence. And it also brings into an understanding of, the earlier work that was done by Howard Gardner around multiple intelligences, comes an understanding of some of the more recent work that's coming out as an offshoot or an evolution of that work that centers around multiple modalities and multiple literacies, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're dealing with multimodal learning and multiple literacies, you're understanding that we have different ways of creating and communicating meaning, and they are called modes. We have different modes of communication. We communicate through text. We communicate through nonverbal communication. We communicate through we communicate through energy, right? And so there's different modes of meaning that we create and different levels of literacy that we have in any given mode. You can be literate in culture. You can be literate in energy. You can be literate in font types. You can be literate in graphics. You can be literate in so many things. And when you develop skills in a certain area and you spend a lot of time in practice of that, your brain grows in the level and the amount of neural pathways that it creates based on the activity that you engage in. So on a very scientific level, and many studies around neuroscience prove this fact, that we have the ability to grow within our psyche and within the skill sets that we have, the different levels of literacies that we have. And this piece of knowledge, I think, is really key to helping us develop in our own levels of resilience. Because when I look at the work of Carol Dweck and looking at the growth mindset, what it's really doing and what I truly believe in is really investing time and in developing your resilience. Right? I think ultimately that's what it's about. Resilience is the key to understanding and being on your path of purpose. And a lot of times when we think about resilience in the sense of like getting back up after you fall. On a very basic level, you need resilience to get back up after you fall. And for me, it's, why do you get back up? How do you get back up? It's really easy to say, well, pull up your bootstraps, brush it off, and get back up. It's really hard to do that when you're on your face, on the ground, in a puddle, and you don't know what to do with yourself because you've been dealing with clinical depression, or you're dealing with, really intense childhood traumas that are now coming up, and you are literally a mess, broken, on the floor. What do you do in that space? Just tell that person, oh, well, get back up, brush it off. No, there's, we need tools. And I think one of the really important, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in terms of a tool that we can use is to believe in cultivating resilience through values towards our ability to grow. To be like, I know I can grow. Science tells me so, if you need that piece of, thing to hold on to. And so there's something I can learn from this. There's something I can learn from this, and what are the lessons that I can learn from it, and how can I grow, and to celebrate your growth at the little bits that you can, and placing priority on growth as opposed to the end result.
Yeah, yeah. And then, because I mean, it's interesting, right? Because oftentimes there's just that innate survival instinct, right? That'll keep people moving forward. And that's like the base level, the base requirement in a lot of situations, right? Is just to, okay, I'm going to get through this because whether it's just for you or for your family, you don't want to leave your family, you don't want to leave your friends. I know for myself, in some of my lowest points, it was that was my why, essentially, to continue forward, right? Was to, it's like I can't give up because what will that do to my family? What will that do? Like I can show up. I have the ability to show up for these people that I really care about and love, and so that became the reason, right?
Right.
That became a way through some really dark moments. And so I love that. And I love the whole idea around growth mindset and neurogenesis and how infinite our capacity is to grow and to learn and to adapt, um,
Mm-hmm.
and to become more resilient, right? To become
Mm-hmm.
strong and to become able to deal with the inevitable challenges
Mm.
that are going to come, especially when you're really putting yourself out there and really wanting to do big things, right? It's easy to not face challenges if you're just playing small and staying to yourself and hiding from the world. But for those of us that are actively choosing um, to be of service and to go out
Yes.
there and to make things better, um, yeah, we better be ready. We better be ready and equipped to deal with what's going to come because there's a lot of crazy dark things that we're going to have to face.
Yeah. It's the toolbox, you know. Um, and it's also sustenance. How do you maintain um, when you're constantly being taxed with so many demands on your life, you know? And one of the tools that we have is to cultivate resilience. But I think another thing that we need to do as in relation to that is cultivate a practice of self-love and a practice of self-care, and that these are intentional things that you have to create goals and plans around, just like anything that you want to achieve. I heard somewhere, and I don't know where this quote comes from, but it speaks to me very deeply, is that, like, a goal without a plan is just a wish, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't have a plan for how you're going to achieve these things that you want to create, if one of the goals that you have is to be the fullest version of yourself, right? If your goal is to be in alignment with your true purpose, if your goal is to be there for other people and to be a full vessel so that you can, bring into manifestation your true mission in life, if your goal is to be a solid rock for the people in your life, that is not possible without being a solid rock for yourself. You cannot give unconditional love to another person before you have unconditional love for yourself. You cannot be a stand for other people in a really integral way until you have that integrity within yourself to be there for yourself. And so I think these are, for me, self-care and revolution are the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
To invest in your own well-being is to invest in the well-being of the community, because we can be only as strong as the sum of our parts. And this is the other thing that I realized in a lot of the social justice organizing that I was doing in the frontline community organizing sector, is that you know the movements that we build can only be as healthy as the individuals that are building them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a bunch of people that are constantly overworked, underpaid, and struggling, and feeling exhausted and burnt out, the things that we are trying to achieve are not going to get to the level that they have the potential to, just in the way that our personal missions will not be able to reach the stage of full manifestation until you have the right parts in place to nurture yourself, to be strong enough to follow through with the things that you need to do to make it happen. So it's almost like foundational to all of this work. Right? Investing in your self-care, taking care of yourself, making sure that you are on a healthy path, and also creating like a plan. And this is a grounding space that's coming up. That was part of, having something regular that people can come to, once a month, making it a part of your day-to-day ritual, your routines, integrating it into your life, I think is super important to create that foundation, because I've learned that at every stage, there's different levels. Again, for me, it all comes back to purpose, right? It all comes back to what is that inner light? What is that God self? It's coming to embrace that we are, again, getting past that shame stuff. We are divine beings. We are powerful beings. We are, pieces of the divine that exist in human form. That is a really huge truth that I think we all have to come to a level of reckoning with, and come to a level of accepting the fact that we are empowered beings to the level that we will embrace this truth that we have the power of the universe at our hands, and, kind of touching back on the difference between the teachings of the church or the institution of the church and the teachings of Christ, right? Christ taught us that we can do as he can do, that those were the instructions, or those are kind of the things that Jesus had said. And he was just a teacher. It's just about, and what is that? What was the embodiment of Christ? The embodiment of Christ is God in human form. And so for me, it's coming to that place of embracing your purpose is to embrace the divinity within yourself. And to embrace the divinity within yourself is to release yourself of the shame, to do the healing work, to understand who you are, that identity piece work that I do with the young people at that stage, and embracing the path of your purpose, and developing the skills that you need, and then investing time in the process of doing the work of filling your vessel so that you have the energy to follow through and become that true embodiment, right? So there's multiple stages of this, so many different stages of this, and that's why I think it's really powerful for us to kind of have that touchstone of purpose, that we are, and ultimately, the core of my work is centered around purpose-driven education. And purpose-driven education, states that the purpose of education should be to help learners identify, align with, and build the skills to pursue your true purpose in life, And skills around self-love, self-care, and grounding are definitely keystones, especially when you get to the stage where you are trying to bring the manifestation happen into your life once you've come into alignment of an understanding of what that might be.
Yeah, because it's so often, and I mean, so much to unpack there, so many things. As you're speaking, I'm just having like things going off and connections, and you're literally like pulling the words from my consciousness at points. So it's just like, oh, I love it.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on that piece of integration, right? That for me has become so much in the forefront of what it is that I do and want to accomplish when I work with clients around wellness and nutrition and lifestyle and all these things, because it's like you said, if we don't make the time for it, if we don't intentionally create the time to do these things, they're just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Life is going to happen, and you're going to be distracted and, pulled in this direction or that direction. And I almost like not almost. And it was interesting because I heard you say how the self care is almost like the foundation for um, everything. And I say it's not almost, it's completely, right? It is the foundation. And words are so powerful. And so I catch myself using that same thing about almost. Um, but when we are constantly seeking healing,
Yeah.
right? I think then that can become a cycle that then becomes perpetuated, right? And my whole thing is always about integrating and harmonizing, right? So how do we integrate these truths? How do we integrate these realizations that we're having around who we are and the purpose that we're on, or the purpose that we're here for, and what works for us? Like what
Mm,
works for us? What's our recipe or formula for self-care, right? Because
mm,
it's always going to be different. And
mm-hmm.
I'm a nutritionist, so it comes back to food and recipes and working in the kitchen and that sort of thing. Um, and so yeah, I just want to remind folks and for myself too that um, even though our current cultural values might not think it's important or might not place it as a high enough priority, or it's not sexy enough for the latest and greatest, um, that it is so foundational, right? And
Yes.
to never forget that, the self care piece is it's not going anywhere. You better get used to it, but learn to enjoy it, learn to love it. And this that I have to highlight that self care equals revolution is
Mm,
so true. It's
mm-hmm.
so true, and I
Mm-hmm.
felt that at times throughout my journey and working with people, um, because if you've never say made yourself like a nice bath, then the act of making the water and putting the salts in and maybe some essential oils and candles,
Yes.
like that's a revolutionary act
Yes.
that is
Yes.
so much more effective, I believe, than going out in the streets and throwing hate at folks, right? As a lot of the social justice warrior people, or not people, movement can be sort of corrupted by, is the whole fighting, right?
Well, I think there's definitely a place for that. Because let's be
Hmm.
honest, right? If you are constantly being beat down by society, there's only so much you can do to a person, beat them and beat them and beat them until they're gonna fight you back, you know?
Hmm.
And taking that very small metaphor and applying it on a larger societal sense, there are folks and different groups that have been marginalized for hundreds of years on a systemic level, that continue to this day. And
Hmm.
so I think there's definitely a place for uprising. I think definitely there is a place for challenging norms in a way that is, perhaps not the most gentle, but there's a time and place for everything. I think, for me, if I know that someone is being brutalized and I can do something about it, it may require that I intervene and I'm very, engaged in a high level of, you know, like I'm not oming. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So there's a place where you kind of have to intervene, and that can take a lot of fire. That may require a lot of fire, right? And then there are times when you may need to withdraw from that situation to do your self care in a more quiet, intimate space where you're restoring now the energy that you've output. So, I think there definitely there's an importance for the warriors, and I think sometimes warriors can be misunderstood in certain aspects of our social justice communities are misunderstood, or the because the issues are so complex, the issues are not fully understood. And so that can definitely have an impact. But the way that I see it truly, as kind of three layers to the process, right? And these are kind of the three ways that I've organized the ways that I serve in the work that I do with Voice of Purpose, right? So I think within coming to the stage of fully embracing your purpose, there's kind of three stages, right? Or three components, right? Rather, I would say. So the first is kind of a cocooning stage where there is a learning of who you are, the becoming, right? The realization. And this is the pieces around understanding your identity, understanding your social and historical context, coming to the place where you're starting to tune into that place of intuition, starting to tune into what is my true voice, what is my true understanding, who am I? What is it that I stand for? What is it that I have been through? What are some of the challenges that I've been through? I organize that kind of in understanding your identity and connecting it with your personal journey and connecting it with wider social issues and taking a stand of who you are, which I call the ICT process. And I employ that through a lot of the work that I do with young people, through a program that I called On the Horizon, which is specifically geared towards high schools, to help young people do that cocooning piece around understanding what their identity is and creating works of art, specifically poetry when I'm working in the classroom, about who they are. What is my identity? What is the context of the world that I live in? What's my place within it? And how do I feel about that? What is the stand that I choose to take? So I think that's number one. That's the first kind of layer of reckoning of who am I? What's my identity? What context am I in? And what do I believe in? One of the next stages is then to really hone that to a very specific focus of how do I want to carve out my life space. Right? What is the career path that I want to go on? What's my mission? What is my true purpose in life? And how do I bring that into manifestation? What are the skill sets that I need? So I kind of call that the lab stage, right? Where you're kind of in the kitchen now, that you've kind of been in the cocoon trying to understand what's the recipe, what's my calling. And then the next stage is to answer that calling, build skills that you need. And so a lot of the work that I do at that level is with artist entrepreneurs and artist educators, kind of passing on the torch of what does it mean if your calling is to be an artist educator, what are the tools that you need, but also as an artist entrepreneur, what are some of the understandings that we need around branding? What are some of the understandings that we need around formulating a business within the space of your purpose? Or what's the next stage of what does your purpose look like out in terms of creating sustenance for yourself and pairing the two very deep instincts that we have within ourselves of survival and creativity, and how do those two kind of come together to manifest your vision, right? And that's the work, whether it be, you're in the frontline trenches, whether you're in the service of others in healing, whether you're an educator, an artist. What is that path? What is that way forward? And then creating the skills around that. And then the third layer of that is like, now when you're in the work of it, what's the maintenance work? Right? And that's where kind of grounding space comes in, is when you have settled into the process of now living life and being in the service of others. And I find that a lot of folks who have kind of come into that alignment are like, my mission is to serve others, and this is the way that I'm doing it. You can serve people through your art. You can serve people and humanity through very tangible actions in terms of social justice. You can be doing it through the healing work that you're doing. You can be doing it through the classroom. Whatever it is that you're doing, in that space of now fulfilling your mission, are you taking care of yourself? Are you making sure that you are maintaining that space of care and love towards yourself so that you can complete the mission that you have embarked on in answering that calling on your life? So that's kind of how I see it in the process that I've personally gone through, and the work that Voice of Purpose does is kind of in those three stages. There's the cocooning stage, right, where you understand your identity, come to a reckoning of your context, and start understanding what is, start filling out what is my calling, what is that thing. And then there's the labbing stage where you figure out what are the different components that I need to master this, to really live in alignment with my purpose. And then when you're in the process of that, to make sure that you're creating a system of self-care for yourself, and a way to focus so that you are filling the vessel and truly meeting that calling. So really like doing it in that way.
I love it. I love it. Like the layers of a beautiful cake. And I love to, speaking of self-care and maintenance and those sorts of things, I always love to ask people about their morning and or evening rituals, if they have them, what they might be, and see if we could share something that someone might want to include in their day. So
Absolutely.
I'm curious what that looks like for you.
So for me, I've actually come to this place where I realized that one of the mutual people that we know, Angelino, he called it the shiny object syndrome. I don't remember what he called it, but it's like a lot of us get really excited about something, right? And it's like, ooh, the shiny thing, and then we like, we like focus so much time on it, and then like we go to this next thing, and then we're like, oh, shiny thing, and like, oh, shiny thing, and we kind of have this way of existing, and so I think it's also developing a solid morning routine for yourself is being really honest about what it is that you need and being really honest about your tendencies and your patterns. So I realized that sometimes, and we just went through New Year's resolution, the building, a lot of people, we're in 2017, it's January, so a lot of people are kind of fired up, myself included, about kind of taking the next steps. And for me, one of the really profound understandings that I came to was around that we exist in seasons. The world exists in seasons, and so do we. And so the plan that I set out for myself in January may not be the plans that make sense in September. So I've developed a system for reviewing on a quarterly all the different things that I am setting in motion for myself, including my morning routine. Right? So for the first quarter, my morning routine looks like I wake up in the morning. The first thing I do is I give thanks for God. I give thanks, and I try to maintain that. Let the first thoughts of my day be of gratitude and of connecting with Spirit and giving thanks for my life and for the breath in my lungs, and just appreciating as much as I can of everything that's around me. And then I'll play some music, just for the morning to kind of start easing into my body. The next thing that I'll do is I'll do some stretches, and then I'll move into some vocal exercises, because as a singer, as a practicing artist, I want to make sure that I'm maintaining the mechanisms, the tools, right? And one of the things that I really learned from my vocal instructor is in the process of doing my vocal warm-ups, I'm not trying to sing right away, but I'm warming up my vessel. Right? So it just starts with puttering, just making of soft sounds and oming, to then going into the singing of the scale and tuning myself with the piano. So it looks like different forms. So first it kind of looks like a prayer. First, then it looks like movement. Then it looks like sound. But the entire morning, for the entire duration of, if I do the full thing, that could take about half an hour to 45 minutes. Sometimes up to an hour if I'm really taking my time with all of those three components. But it's essentially waking up and then just moving into the vessel and warming up the vessel, tuning in so that we can be, it's almost like testing your signal in the morning and just bringing out our faculties, waking up our faculties to give and receive,
Mm.
And then after that, I'll move into, depending on what kind of food intake that I'm doing for that day, and then planning of looking through my agenda and looking at my day, and then then I move into the flow of whatever is planned for that day. But those three things are kind of really staple for me right now in terms of my morning routine.
I
And
love it.
yeah,
I love it.
yeah. And then in the evening, I just review kind of, I have a system right now that I'm working with that has, it's called Best Year Ever.
Best year ever. Dan
Yeah,
Hardy.
so I'm doing Best Year
Yeah.
Ever right now, but it has like a weekly way of taking account of your goals for the year, and also your goals for right now, tangible kind of behavioral things that you need to be doing throughout the day, whether it be like calling my mom or, making sure that I'm maintaining my dance practice. I have a checklist of all the different things that I had set out for myself as things that I wanted to do for that day. So I will go through that checklist at the end of the night, do that balance sheet of looking at, my goals and my calendar, and, making sure that the things that I've set out, that I said I want to achieve, that I'm actually physically now translating that into time blocks into my day, and going through the checklist of, okay, what's up for tomorrow, and then I give thanks and praises again before sleep, and then, yeah.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for sharing. It's yeah, it's just incredible. It's incredible, and I mean, we're definitely, one person said it really well, that humans are pattern creating beings, right? We create patterns, we notice patterns, we act out patterns, and so the more intentional we can get with those, and the more tuned into what really feeds us and keeps us on track, um,
Mm-hmm.
it just makes everything so much easier,
Mm-hmm.
so much easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like building that foundation, right?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's interesting touching on shiny object syndrome. That's something I've noticed that I have definitely been fallen prey to in the past.
I think
And
we all
so,
have.
yeah, well, I mean, living in the world today, it's pretty hard not to, right?
Mm,
Being connected to the internet and social media and
yeah,
billboards, and it's like it's insane.
it's designed that way, actually, right? To design
Hmm.
to accommodate for this shiny object syndrome. It's definitely a cultural phenomenon, I think, especially in the Western world. Um, that immediate gratification, and and those of us who are kind of in the spiritual or awakening community are not immune to that.
No, well, and I think for us, it takes the form of what's the next piece of growth, or what's the next best superfood, or the next best exercise, or meditation, or which is all great. It's all
Yeah.
great. It's all with good intention. But yeah, I think we can just get a little bit carried away sometimes.
Yeah, and again, it's coming back to that integration of how do we implement these things with a level of consistency, because the fallout with the shiny object syndrome is that it's very fiery, it's quick, and it's over,
And it burns out.
and it burns out. And to create real pathways to our true inner purpose, I think you have to create intentional consistency in the areas that you want to uh, manifest in your life ultimately.
Definitely, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I would love to get from folks is three resources, whether those are books or quotes or teachings or whatever it might be, three resources that have had a significant impact on your life.
3 resources that have had a significant impact on my life. Well, I spoke to kind of the 3 different stages of the things that I really prioritize my work on. So I will focus one for each.
Mm.
Um, One resource that I found really powerful in terms of the work that created foundation for me in helping to understand my identity and that personal work that I needed to do within myself of that cocooning stage, right? Of coming to grips of understanding my own identity, coming to grips with an understanding of the context that I live in, and what is it that I choose to take a stand for. One of my deepest heroes in life is a woman named Grace Lee Boggs. And she is actually, she passed away a couple of years ago, very recently. And she was a Chinese American woman who lived in Detroit and had dedicated her life to, as an Asian woman, fighting in the resistance for Black liberation. And she was a really inspirational figure in terms of helping to contextualize the importance of social justice work and the importance of education and the arts in that work. She definitely was a huge advocate for the arts and for education and the role that it plays within this larger context of social justice, which includes talking about race inequities, talking about systemic oppression, talking about, the realities that lay at the foundation of Western civilization today. And she called her book The Next American Revolution. And that was a book that deeply and profoundly, I was bawling. I was like, oh my God, you're speaking my life, like everything that I was feeling within myself, you've written about. So that was a huge resource for me. The second piece around so the second stage, the labbing stage, which I didn't go deeply into in terms of the work that I do around supporting artist entrepreneurs and kind of stepping into that mission. One of the things that I found really deeply helpful along my journey were the teachings of Jerry Foster. And Jerry Foster is a really amazing and inspiring individual that focuses his work around branding and looking at how to cultivate and shape your brand around an understanding that a brand is a promise and kind of cultivating an understanding of marrying now, because where that really was really powerful for me is understanding that as a revolutionary, right, as somebody who's in social justice work, a lot of us have very difficult relationships with capitalism and difficult relationship with engaging in the economy because we understand our current economic system to be so corrupt, to be so such a tool for domination and control and power and greed for a ruling upper class that we, and myself included, fight against that system in very nuanced ways. It can look like protesting on the street to sabotaging our own financial well-being because we somehow feel like that's more righteous, and feeling very triggered around words like marketing and branding and these sorts of ideas, and myself included. I totally went through that entire thing until I realized that these are just words that explain tools to be able to communicate, right? To be able to communicate your message properly is to be able to serve the people that you are benefiting the most, right? That how can I communicate what it is that I offer to the people that I can have the deepest amount of impact, who I can serve the deepest, and that is coming to a place, if you are an entrepreneur, understanding what your brand is and understanding how to communicate that through the proper channels, and understanding your market is to understand who are the people that are going to most receive the gift that you have to offer and move them in a way that is going to help them in their lives. Not about skeezy, salesmen selling the old at the used cars, salesman thing. No, definitely these tools have been used by people, but again, it's just like any tool. it depends on the intentionality behind it. But for these tools, for a lot of us who are in the conscious or social justice geared communities, have become trigger points of trauma. And so it was a relearning for me to kind of go through that understanding of having a business-minded mentality. If I truly want to manifest my purpose and I want to be able to sustain myself and be able to truly have the most amount of impact on the people that I feel like I am here to serve, it requires that I have developed a certain level of business savvy. And so I have started teaching workshops around branding with Making a Living Making Art series that I recently did with the Neighborhood Arts Network, and we're going to be rolling out with the webinar series soon around that. But a lot of the stuff that I learned came from Jerry Foster, right? Came from New Peaks or Peak Potentials, a lot of their programmings. So I definitely have to give a lot of kudos to them because they've been very integral in helping me to shape understandings of being able to reframe my relationship with business and entrepreneurship. And the third layer, the self-care aspect, I have to give a lot of my knowledge around healing credit to the Integral Healing Center of Toronto. John Went is the leading teacher there, and that is the course that I took over a period of 4 years that centers around the modalities of psychotherapy, bioenergetic therapy, and energy healing, which we had made previous context of the book Healing Trauma by Peter Levine, and that was one of the staple kind of textbooks of that course. The other staple textbook from that course was Anodea Judith's Eastern Body, Western Mind. Anodea Judith. And that is a really important resource for anybody who is on that journey of healing for yourself. If you want to get a deeper understanding of how Eastern modes of energy healing work with Western understanding of psychotherapy and how they meet in the body, those two books are really, really important. And ultimately, the deepest resource I think that we can kind of tap into is our own internal light, is our own internal voice. You can be given a list of 1,000 resources, right? But if we are not tuned in to ourselves to be able to follow that inner guidance, then we will be stuck in that dance of trying to live up to other people's expectations or trying to live up to a certain should, as opposed to truly tuning into the lessons that are going to serve us and help us to progress on our path. And so I would say the deepest resource that we can always come back to, that is always there, always there, is that inner light within us that is connected to spirit and connected with all.
Amen, sister. Yes, that is the good stuff. I love it. And I just wanted to re-emphasize, because I'm myself, very much in the midst of deprogramming and reprogramming myself around finances and around organization and systems and really going pro. Stephen Pressfield, who's a fantastic author, talks about going pro. And so that's part of my 2017 mission. And it's like the better that you do, the more good you can do in the world and the more impact you can have. So it's so important for everyone out there who wants to do that, to want to have an impact, to really get clear around finances and business and branding and using it and playing it like the game it is, right? It's not like we're being super attached to it, but it's where we're at. It's the time we find ourselves in, and it's just what has to be done.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, if folks kind of want to have continue some of these conversations with me, they can always find me at voiceofpurpose.org. And in terms of my own personal resources that I can offer you, there's a lot there as well. Like I have also a podcast where I interview different educators called Empowering Educators, and it's a podcast centered around purpose-driven education that folks can tune into. And I also had a series, a web TV series last year centered around Voice of Purpose as well, and that was centered around interviewing people who had found their true purpose in life and talking about their journeys in that process. So we can also provide links for those as well, and yeah, I'm always also willing to be a resource for people. So you are welcome to join me at any point in time. And yeah, I can also, there's another very easy resource that I could send to you that we can share with people. And it's the 7 practical steps of aligning or understanding to finding your true purpose, which is like a really easy PDF that people can access. So I can definitely send you along those things because I know you like to provide resources for people.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic. And so, son, I just want to take a moment and acknowledge you and thank you for showing up and for shining and for stepping into this power and really just being a voice and a heart and a soul that's making an impact. And I mean, I've only seemingly just met you, but already I can feel, strong resonance with what you're up to. And yeah, I just want to thank you for showing up and being open and standing tall and taking care of yourself so that you can serve the world.
Thank you, and definitely want to acknowledge you as well, and sending you infinite gratitude for having me on your podcast. I definitely feel that strong resonance as well. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing and helping people to tell their stories and bringing more resources and light into the world. I think that's super important, and so it's been a great honor. And I think the last thing that I will kind of leave with people is, yeah, take care of yourself, and if you need a little bit of extra support around helping you to ground and helping you to deepen into what your true path of purpose is, know that there is a resource out there for you through Voice of Purpose, but also very tangibly in the immediate sense through Grounding Space, which is a event that will be happening January 21st from 2 to 5 p.m. And we'll have a link there for you as well. And every month on the third Saturday, January, February, March, the third Saturday from 2 to 5, there will be a space for you to come and ground and explore what we can do to help you establish a practice of self-care that goes beyond the workshop into integrating these things into your life so that you can be a stronger person and a presence for yourself and for others. And so this workshop specifically speaks to and outreaches to folks who are in the service of others, who kind of feel the burnout or the pressure to kind of do this work, but are feeling like they are running on sometimes an empty tap. So it will be definitely a really healing and grounding experience to help fill back up our cups so that we can go back out there and keep shining our light.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, so if you're listening and that sounds like you're feeling the call, I think I'm feeling the call. I got to at least check it out. I got to at least check it out a little bit more. Then yeah, maybe we'll see you soon. And for everyone listening, thank you so much. Keep redefining reality and have an amazing day.
Bye. Thank you.
Ciao.